She thought no one would ever hear her story. But now you have. Subscribe to give voice to others like her. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 now, and what I'm about to tell you happened when I was 22 and desperate for any job I could find. I never imagined that the most humiliating moment of my life would become the fuel for everything I achieved afterward. The manager who crushed my dreams that day had no idea he was creating his own future boss. I'll never forget walking into that electronics store 3 years ago, wearing my only interview outfit, a black blazer I'd borrowed from my roommate and shoes that were slightly too big. I was fresh out of college with a business degree and drowning in student loans. My savings account had exactly $47, and my rent was due in 5 days. I needed this job more than I'd ever needed anything in my life, but what happened? And that interview would haunt me for months and drive me to prove everyone wrong in ways I never thought possible. The store was bustling with customers, and I watched the employees helping people with phones, laptops, and gaming systems. I imagined myself there, building relationships with customers, maybe eventually moving into management. I had big dreams, even if my bank account was empty. When David Martinez called my name, I stood up with confidence I didn't really feel. He was the store manager, mid-40s, expensive watch, the kind of guy who made sure everyone knew he was in charge. His handshake was firm, but his eyes barely met mine as he led me to a small office in the back. The interview started normally. Enough. He asked about my experience, my availability, why I wanted to work there. I gave my prepared answers, talking about my passion for technology and customer service. I thought it was going well until he asked about my previous work experience. That's when everything fell apart in the most devastating way possible. Explained that I'd worked part-time jobs through college, mostly food service and retail. But this would be my first full-time position in electronics. I was honest about being new to the field, but emphasized my eagerness to learn and my strong work ethic. David leaned back in his chair and looked at me like I just told him I wanted to become an astronaut. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then he said something that would echo in my mind for the next 3 years. Look, Sarah, I'm going to be straight with you. Based on your background, I don't think you're even qualified to work the register, let alone anywhere else in this store. This is a technical sales environment. We need people who actually understand technology, not college kids who think they can figure it out as they go. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger, but I tried to maintain my composure. I started to explain that I was a quick learner, that I'd already researched the products, that I was genuinely passionate about technology. He cut me off with a wave of his hand that made me feel like I was 2 inches tall. I've been in this business for 15 years. I can tell within 5 minutes if someone has what it takes. You don't. Maybe try applying at the clothing stores in the mall. That might be more your speed. I sat there stunned, trying to process what had just happened. This man had dismissed everything about me, my education, my potential, my dreams, based on assumptions he'd made in 5 minutes. He wasn't just rejecting me for the job. He was telling me I wasn't good enough to exist in his world. But what happened next was even worse than the rejection itself. As I gathered my things and prepared to leave, trying desperately not to cry in front of him, David called out to the store floor, "Hey, Marcus, come here for a second." A younger employee jogged over, and David said loud enough for me to hear, "This is why I don't waste time with certain types of applicants. Save us all some trouble next time." The humiliation was complete. I walked out of that store feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. I sat in my car in the parking lot and finally let the tears come. Not just because I didn't get the job, but because someone had looked at me and decided I wasn't worth a chance. That night, I called my mom and told her what happened. I expected sympathy, maybe some comforting words about how that manager was. Wrong. Instead, she said something that changed everything. Sweetheart, you can either let this break you, or you can let it make you. But if you choose to let it make you, you better be ready to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Her words hit me like lightning. I realized I had two choices. I could accept David's assessment of me and settle for less, or I could prove him so spectacularly wrong that he'd regret ever doubting me. I chose war, but not the kind he expected. The next morning, I started applying for every entry-level position in tech I could find. Not retail, real tech jobs. Customer support, technical writing, junior developer positions. I knew I was underqualified for most of them, but I was determined to get my foot in the door somewhere. Anywhere. After 2 weeks of rejections, I finally got an interview at a small software company. They needed someone for customer support, someone who could learn their platform and help users troubleshoot problems. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but it was my chance to prove I could handle technology. But I knew getting the job was only the beginning of my real challenge. I threw myself into that position like my life depended on it, because in many ways it did. I arrived early, stayed late, and spent every free moment learning everything I could about the software, about technology, about business. While my coworkers went out for drinks after work, I was taking online courses in programming, project management, and sales strategy. 6 months in, I was promoted to senior customer support. A year later, I was training new hires. But I wasn't satisfied with just succeeding. I was obsessed with excelling. Every day, I thought about David's words, and every day, they fueled me to push harder. The real breakthrough came when I noticed patterns in customer complaints that nobody else was seeing. I started documenting these issues and proposing solutions. When I presented my findings to management, they were amazed. Not only did my recommendations improve customer satisfaction, but they also saved the company money. That's when I realized I had a gift for understanding both technology and people. Exactly the combination. David said I lacked within 18 months. I was offered a position in business development. By the end of my second year, I was managing a team of 5 people, but I still wasn't done. I had bigger plans, and they all trace back to that humiliating day in David's office. I started working on a business plan in my spare time. I'd identified a gap in the market. Small businesses needed better access to affordable technology solutions, but most companies only focused on big corporate clients. I knew I could build something better, something that actually served people who were overlooked by companies like David's. The plan consumed my evenings and weekends for months. One researched competitors, developed financial projections, and created a comprehensive strategy for launching a technology consulting and retail business. When I finally presented it to potential investors, I was terrified but prepared. 3 venture capital firms rejected me. The 4th one said yes. 80 months later, I was the CEO of my own company. We specialized in helping small and medium businesses find the right technology solutions at prices they could afford. But we weren't just consultants. We also had a retail component, selling the products we recommended. Business was good, better than I dared to hope. But I still hadn't forgotten about David or the lesson he'd taught me about how people treat others they perceive as beneath them. That's when fate presented me with the perfect opportunity for closure. 2.5 years after starting my company, we were expanding rapidly. We needed experienced retail managers for our new locations, people who understood both technology sales and team leadership. I was reviewing resumes when I saw a familiar name that made my heart race. David Martinez was applying to work for me. According To his resume, he'd been laid off from the electronics store 6 months earlier when the company downsized. He'd been unemployed since then, despite his 15 years of experience. The same confidence that had led him to dismiss me so cruelly had apparently not served him well in a changing job market. I stared at his resume for a long time, remembering every detail of that devastating interview. Part of me wanted to reject his application immediately to give him a taste of the humiliation he'd served me. But I realized I had a choice to make about what kind of leader I wanted to be. I decided to interview him personally, but I didn't tell him who I was beforehand. When David walked into my office for the interview, I watched his face carefully. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. The expensive watch was gone, replaced by a simple digital one. His suit, while clean and pressed, had the slightly worn look of someone who'd been wearing the same interview outfit for months. For a moment, he looked confused, like he might recognize me but couldn't place where from. Then his expression shifted to the professional smile he probably used with all potential employers, respectful, eager, nothing like the dismissive attitude he'd shown me 3 years earlier. I let him go through his entire pitch about his experience, his leadership skills, his passion for retail technology. He was polished, confident, everything you'd want in a retail manager. When he finished, I leaned back in my chair, the same way he had during our first encounter. "David," I said, "I have to ask you something. In your 15 years of experience, have you ever made a judgment about someone's capabilities based solely on their appearance or background without giving them a real chance to prove themselves?" His smile faltered slightly. "Well, I mean, in retail, you do have to make quick assessments about customers and employees. It's part of the job. What about potential employees who might be different from what you expect? Young people, minorities, women in tech. Have you ever dismissed someone who might have surprised you?" Now he looked genuinely uncomfortable. I try to be fair to everyone, but sometimes you have to make practical decisions based on experience and fit. That's when I knew he still didn't recognize me, and more importantly, he hadn't learned anything from whatever failures had led him to my office. I opened my laptop and pulled up a photo from our company website, a picture of me receiving an award for Young CEO of the Year from the local business association. I turned the screen toward him and watched as recognition dawned on his face. "My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 years ago, you told me I wasn't even qualified to work a register at your store. You said I should try applying at clothing stores, because technology retail was beyond my capabilities." David's face went white. I could see him trying to remember exactly what he'd said, probably hoping it hadn't been as bad as I was making it sound, but we both knew it had been worse. I'm sorry, I don't remember that specific conversation, but if I said something inappropriate, you remember, I interrupted. You called your employee over to make sure he understood not to waste time with certain types of applicants. You made assumptions about my abilities based on your prejudices, and you humiliated me in the process. The silence in the room was deafening. David looked like he wanted to disappear, and part of me felt sorry for him, but I wasn't done yet. "Here's what's interesting, David. Despite your assessment of my capabilities, I've built a company that's now worth over $2 million. We have 37 employees across 4 locations. And ironically, we're looking for experienced retail managers." I could see him trying to process this information, probably calculating whether there was any way to salvage this situation. "The question is," I continued, "what kind of leader do you think I should be? Should I judge you the way you judge me? Should I dismiss your potential based on 5 minutes and my personal feelings about our history?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "I made a mistake. I was wrong about you, obviously. I'm sorry." For the first time since he'd walked in, his apology sounded genuine. but I needed to know if he truly understood what he'd done wrong, or if he was just sorry he'd been caught. What exactly were you wrong about, David? He took a deep breath. I judged you based on assumptions instead of giving you a chance to prove yourself. I let my own biases cloud my judgment about your potential. And I treated you disrespectfully when you deserved basic human dignity. That was closer to what I needed to hear, but I wasn't finished with this conversation. Do you remember what you said about being able to tell within 5 minutes if someone has what it takes? He nodded miserably. What do you think that says? About your judgment, given where we are now? It says my judgment was terrible. It says I missed an opportunity to hire someone exceptional, and I probably missed many other opportunities because I was too arrogant to see past my own preconceptions. Now we were getting somewhere, but I had one more question, the most important one. If I hired you, how would I know you wouldn't treat my employees, my customers, or future job applicants the same way you treated me? David was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, less polished, more human. Honestly, you can't know for sure. I can tell you that losing my job and struggling to find work has been humbling in ways I never expected. I can tell you that I've had time to think about mistakes I've made and people I've underestimated. That you'd have to take a chance on me the same way you wanted me to take a chance on you. It was a good answer, honest, vulnerable, and it showed. Some self-awareness. But I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. There's something else you should know, David. The day you rejected me, I went home and cried. Not just because I didn't get the job, but because you made me feel worthless. Your words almost broke me. His face crumpled. I'm so sorry. I had no right to treat you that way, regardless of whether I thought you were qualified for the position. But they didn't break me, I continued. They motivated me. Every success I've had since then, I've achieved partly because I was determined to prove you wrong. In a twisted way, your cruelty helped create the person I am today. I could see him struggling with how to respond to that. That doesn't make what I did right, he said finally. You succeeded despite my behavior, not because of it. And you succeeded because of who you are, not because of anything I said or did. For the first time in our conversation, I smiled. It was the right answer. I made my decision in that moment, but I didn't tell him immediately. Instead, I spent another 20 minutes asking him standard interview questions about his management style, his experience with team building, his approach to customer service. I wanted to evaluate him fairly, the way he should have evaluated me 3 years earlier. By the end of the interview, I had to admit he was qualified for the position. His experience was genuine, his management skills were solid, and he seemed to have learned something from his recent struggles. But more importantly, he'd shown genuine remorse and self-reflection about his past behavior. When I finally offered him the job, the relief on his face was overwhelming. I won't let you down, he promised, and I'll spend every day proving that. You made the right decision giving me a second chance. David, I said, I'm not giving you this job because I'm trying to prove a point or because I want to hold power over you. I'm giving it to you because you're qualified and because I believe people can change, but I need you to understand something. He nodded eagerly. This company exists partly because people like you convinced me I had to create my own opportunities. We serve clients who've been overlooked by bigger companies. We hire employees who might not look like traditional candidates, but who have incredible potential. If you're going to work here, you need to embrace that mission completely. I understand, he said, and I want to be part of building something like that. 6 months later, David has become one of our best managers. He's patient with new employees, thoughtful about giving people chances to prove themselves, and completely committed to our company's values. He's also become something I never expected, a friend and trusted advisor, But the most surprising part of this story isn't David's transformation or even my success. It's what I learned about myself through the process of forgiving him. When I first saw his resume, I was angry all over again. I wanted revenge. I wanted him to feel as small as he'd made me feel. But choosing to judge him fairly, to give him the chance he'd denied me, taught me something profound about leadership and about the kind of person I want to be. Success isn't just about proving your doubters wrong. It's about becoming someone who lifts others up instead of tearing them down. It's about creating opportunities instead of just taking them. And sometimes it's about giving second chances to people who didn't give you a first one. David will probably never fully understand how much his rejection changed my life, how it drove me to achieve things I might never have attempted if he'd just given me that entry-level job. In a strange way, his cruelty was a gift, even though it nearly destroyed me at the time. But I hope my decision to hire him taught him something too. That people's potential can't be measured in 5 minutes. That everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. And that the young woman he dismissed as unqualified for a register job could someday become the CEO who gave him a second chance. The last time we talked about that day, David told me he keeps a photo on his desk, not of his family or his achievements, but of our company's mission statement. It reminds him, he said, of the person he used to be and the person he's trying to become. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving them capable of being better than they were. And sometimes the person who hurt you the most can become your greatest teacher about forgiveness, growth, and the power of second chances. That manager thought he could determine my worth in 5 minutes. 3 years later, I determined his, and chose to see it as greater than his worst moment. That, I think, is what real success looks like.